Welcome to the Maui Pono Network interviews for the 2026 candidates. And today we have Alan Lloyd with us, who is running for the county council seat for Wailuku, Waiahe. Could you, Alan, just start off, please, by just giving an overview of your background, your experience, and how you've been involved with community issues that are very relevant to us. And as a sequence also to these questions, we'll have then Lucienne Dene will be asking questions, and then Robin Knox, and then Rita Ryan. We'll go in those sequence, and I will be in the background after this little section here. So, Alan, please just give us your background and your experience you've had with community issues, especially.
Thank you, Paul. So my name is Alan Lloyd. I'm running for Maui County Council, Wailuku seat. So let's just talk about my educational and academic background. I have a master's in social work and policy and planning. And then I've worked in different positions in policy and planning. I work for the city attorney's office in their housing and land use division. So we worked on policy development there. I've worked for the police commission and was the chair of the police commission and did policy development there. I worked for, these are all in Washington State, and I'll get to my Maui experience in a little bit. I worked for the state legislature, and they asked the question of, can we keep manufacturing in Washington State? And so we did research on how to keep manufacturing in Washington State, and then made a proposal to the state legislature committee on workers and labor. And then I did policy development for the Seattle City Council on hygiene, especially around housing and homeless. And there was concerns about urinating on the streets. And so I did some research on that and presented a proposal to the Seattle City Council. And surprisingly, people thought it was the houseless who were peeing in the streets. And what we found out from our research was it was those coming from the football games who then went to the alleyways and peed in the alleyways, urinated there. So, it wasn't the houseless. So, and then within the last 5 years, I working with the Hawaii Workers Center in organizing tenants, and we worked on developing a proposal for rent stabilization in Maui. We drafted a proposal. This is with that the tenants are involved in. It's called the Maui Tenant and Worker Association. We drafted a proposal and presented it to each of the council members, meeting with them individually. And then Councilmember Johnson took that proposal and developed his own proposal on rent stabilization. So that's my general policy and planning. And then I've also done well, now I'm a tutor in Wailuku Elementary School, so I'm a reading tutor. And I've also been a Big Brother, part of Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Yeah, that's my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Lucienne, I'll let you take it from here.
Oh, thank you. And welcome, Alan, to
Thank you.
This interview process for the Pono Network. We've heard that you have a lot of, your focus has been on affordable housing. And I was just wondering if you tracked the Bill 9 when it was in the county council that did phase out a number of short-term rentals and more or less make it possible for them to be long-term rentals. Do you have any thoughts on how you would have voted if you would have been a council member at that time? You know, and any insights on that process and how it might work or might not work, and anything you'd care to comment.
Yeah, if I was on the council then, I would have voted in favor of Bill 9. I would have also wanted to add some rent stabilization to that because you can add to the supply of housing and it won't necessarily reduce the rents or bring the rents down. Research has shown that. So that's and if I'm elected, I would vote to not repeal Bill 9.
Thank you. And as far as implementing it, the council has a bit of a role in that. Right now, they're considering looking at some categorical exemptions to that. If you were elected to the council and that was still on the table, where would you weigh in on that?
If the council, the majority of the council wants to vote to um, change zoning from apartment zoning to hotel zoning for certain units. I don't think it can happen for certain units. Can it happen for certain buildings? Maybe it can happen for certain buildings. I would, if they're going to do that again, I would like to add rent stabilization to that. So would I vote in favor of it? In general, I would not, because it's too complicated. You can't do individual units. So you have a property owner in a building that wants to change to a hotel zoning, but maybe the other property owners don't want to change. So that makes it very complicated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your response. Well, I guess over to you, Robin.
Yeah, so as you know, on our council, the different council members chair different committees. If elected, what would be your first choice of committee to chair? Understanding that they change the names and responsibilities every session, but what would your desire be?
My desire would be if housing and land use still continued or housing to either be vice chair. I don't think I'd be chair as a junior member, but to be vice chair of that committee because my expertise is in housing and land use.
Okay. And then with regard to the county's client action and resilience plan, what is your platform with regard to climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience measures?
So I'm going to just talk a little bit before I talk about my platform is that I think the county has not been prepared for storms and obviously not prepared for fires because we have sinkholes in Kihei. And the latest report I saw was that we have a lot of sinkholes all over the island. So my platform is about really being prepared for disasters. So I'd like to see a plan where we're prepared for those disasters. What are we going to do? First, the plan. What are we going to do in this situation, this situation, this situation? And I also like to see a risk assessment done of the island to see what are the risks. And then from there, develop a plan. So what are we going to do in this situation or this or that situation? So that would be how I present it and look at it. First planning uh, and then bills to plan and prepare for that. Because many people, when I go door to door, and I've done a lot of door to door campaigning, tell me their main issues are affordable housing and infrastructure. So that's infrastructure.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Do I get to do one more question?
You can follow up on that if you want. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to go to another topic, which is what would you do about our houseless population, especially I'm thinking of Kihei where there is no shelter, and you know people complain a lot about the houseless folks living on the street or in their cars, and we have no safe parking lot. What would your actions be with regard to that?
Well, my first action, since the council's already approved and the mayor is supposed to be implementing a safe parking lot I would like to find out why the mayor has not implemented a safe parking lot. And I would work to advocate with the mayor's office and advocate with the leaders who are in the community who want to see safe parking lots to put pressure on the mayor to make that safe parking lot. So second, I think that because I went to talk to a small business when I was getting my oil changed, I went to talk to a small business and I asked them what was their main issues, and they told me basically it was the houseless urinating during the nighttime in their parking lot. And so I asked them about different kinds of solutions, and they said to me, so they couldn't think of any. So I said, well, what about if we had Santa cans, not on your property, but in the area that were cleaned twice a day? And they liked that idea. And thirdly, one of the biggest solution to obviously houselessness is housing, and for those that need it, services that go with that housing. Sorry, one more thing. They also complained about there was a woman that was outside of their business who was yelling at the passing cars. And so they said they called the police, and the police come and they try to move the person along, but many people are, in their eyes, were not moving along. So I suggested, what about if instead of calling the police, you call a mental health worker? And so they like that idea also. So that's part of my platform is to have a humane treatment, because they were concerned, they were cared about that person, but they didn't know, they had their hands thrown up because they didn't know what to do. They didn't have solutions. So that's part of who I am, is presenting solutions or getting solutions from other people. Because right now, the council majority is not working to solve these problems. They're just not doing anything about houselessness. Thank you.
Rita.
Aloha. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time today, Alan. We really appreciate it. Way back in 2019, before the Maui fires, the Lahaina fires and the Kula fires, the county council voted to declare a climate emergency. That was 2019, and the idea was to accelerate to a just transition to a safe climate. Some of the things that resolution wanted to accelerate was how we respond to wildfires and droughts, extreme flooding, coral and ecosystem loss, and also mental health and housing. How do you feel about that declaration, and has the council done enough to prepare, and what can they do? If you were on the council, what would you do in order to prepare for this just transition to a more equitable environment, both reducing fossil fuels, as we had stated we would do, and also preparing for these climate-related disasters?
Thank you for that question. I can say firsthand the council's not done enough. And so reducing fossil fuels, one of the parts of my platform is that we need to, there's a goal in 19 years to be 100% renewable resources. So one of my goals is to make sure that our two electrical plants are using less and less oil. So in fact, within 3 or 4 years, they're supposed to be closed down. But we don't have a plan really to move to renewable sources. We have by that time the plants are closed down. So that's one of my main goals, is to get us off of oil for energy, which would be either having wind farms, solar farms, or providing incentives for people to put solar on their house. The second most second most used energy right now after oil is solar on rooftops. So I would move to, and I have a friend who she's thinking about doing solar, but she doesn't want to have the attachment of, so it's almost like a second mortgage. She doesn't want to have the attachment of losing her house. She's 81. She doesn't want to have the attachment of losing her house because the way the solar is set up is that you make payments for a 25-year period.
Yes, the leases, the solar leases.
Leases, right.
Mhm.
Right. So like second, I know that golf courses use pesticides and they roll off and off into the groundwater and off into the ocean, which affects our coral. So I'm for a ban on those pesticides. Thank you.
Great, great. A couple of follow-up questions. Do you believe Lahaina was a climate-fueled disaster? Was it fueled by the climate crisis, or was it fueled by the water issues?
I think the fire in Lahaina was fueled by lack of preparation. It was fueled by wind. It was fueled by spark that was caused by downed electric lines. And it was fueled by grasses that weren't kept low enough. So the grasses accelerated the fire.
So is that no, that it was not due to the climate crisis? It was due to other factors, or do you believe that the climate crisis and the warming climate had a play in it?
So the answer would be yes. I believe that the climate crisis had a play in the fires.
Great.
Because more heat, we have more heat that's coming down on us, and because of global warming, and so that contributes to.
Right, right. There was a super hurricane about 600 miles offshore that caused those winds to get sucked off the island. So very good. I have another question about you had mentioned about rooftop solar. So, and you mentioned that you were going door to door and that you had talked to an 81-year-old lady who was concerned about putting a lease, which is like putting a lien on your house, for those solar panels that can go 20 years, and most people cannot pay for them out of pocket. Therefore, they lease those. What do you think the county could do to help people who are in that situation where they would like to go solar, they would like to generate solar electricity, but they don't have the means to do that?
So the county can provide incentives, financial incentives. So instead of like a loan, they could provide a grant. I mean, I think that this is an emergency, right? We need to get off of oil. There's a climate crisis. So we need to, for those people who can't afford to do rooftop solar, we need to provide incentives. And if that means a grant, then that means a grant.
And what about renters? How can how can the county help renters who don't have the option to install their own rooftop solar?
Well, that's a really good question. Because renters don't own the house, they can't make that decision.
Right.
So renters maybe can educate the owners about the fact that, well, here's a grant. It's not going to cost you anything to put rooftop solar. It's going to save you money in your electric bill.
Right. And where's the funding for those grants? How do you see that funding coming about? Through extra property taxation, or how can the money be allocated from the county budget to provide those grants?
Yeah, so that's part of my whole platform is that I will advocate for those who are non-owner occupied properties who don't live on the island. They're not residents that don't live on the island and have properties valued at more than $5 million. They pay a higher property tax.
Okay. And that
That's
would,
where the money would come from.
okay, thank you.
Because
Thank
we have very low property taxes here compared to other towns the size of Maui.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm.
All right, moving right along. Well, while we're on climate impacts, there is flooding and drainage and talk about not being prepared. If you were on the council, Alan, and you say we're on a committee that could look into how our drainage policies are working, what would you be suggesting that we do to avoid the catastrophic impacts that we've been seeing with large rain events?
So I want to know from the administration what their plans are to prevent uh, the flooding and the overflows. I mean, that's the first thing I'd want to do. And if we don't have a plan, I'd call for a plan being developed as to how to deal with that. Because it doesn't seem like to me that we have, everything seems haphazard to me. Some
Well,
crisis happened.
let me cut to the chase. There is a master plan for Kihei. I think Robin can speak to this. She might want to do follow-up. And it basically says, yeah, just make bigger cement channels to get that water to the ocean faster. In essence, that is the master drainage plan. But of course, that doesn't help our oceans, and it causes erosion along these concrete channels, and they often do overflow and still cause havoc. So if for instance that were our plan, which right now, there are some nuances on it. There's some, upslope drainage basins and things like that proposed, but you seem a practical type of person. What would you do to find out the best thing to do if you didn't already, have some ideas yourself?
What I would do is find out what other islands do, what other towns do that have flood issues, and so I can find some models. That's what I would do.
Would you be interested in looking at models of Maui's past in a more, traditional knowledge as well?
Yes, yes, I'd be interested in that.
Because we have had big rains for centuries. Long before there was a county of Maui, we've had big rains. The place, as my Hawaiian friends tell us, the place names tell us that when you have Kulani Hakoi, the overflowing tears of heaven, it's telling you that this is a place where a lot of water is going to be coming down. So that name's been in place for centuries, and but we need a plan to cooperate with it. What about just a quick follow through? Um, there are individuals who are very personally impacted by various projects getting permits to build. A project will get permitted in what has historically been a wetlands, and then the people next door, when the waters that used to go and settle in that area are now running over the small drainage, the artificial drainage patterns that were created there, and then running into their yards and flooding their houses. How would you, as a council person, even if these people weren't in your district, and some of them would be, because Wailuku's had a lot of flooding, how would you provide a forum for their concerns to be heard and addressed by, the county administration, the public works, the people who actually are supposed to be responsible for making these kinds of decisions?
Well, I think one of my roles as council person is to make sure that I hear from constituents, and so I can organize. I mean, working for the Maui Tenants and Workers Association, I organized forums. I organized socials to hear from tenants about what their concerns were and what kinds of solutions. So, because there is expertise on Maui, and there's also traditions, like you mentioned, that we can use. So I would be open to I'd want forums, in fact, because I don't have all the solutions.
So you're suggesting that as a council person, you could hold some sort of a town hall or something just on this topic to listen. And then how would that information, I mean, it'd be great that you're listening. How would that get back to the powers that be to start them looking at building applications and seeing if that driveway is actually going to flood somebody's house? I hate to get practical, but it is on that practical level. When you just talk to people in the community, it's on that practical level that things are happening with these flooding conditions.
So, like anything, to get the administration's attention, you have to make sure they're at forums. You have to organize groups of people to go and talk to the administration and ask them what are going to be their solutions. So, I would be an organizer then, organize people to go and talk to the mayor's office.
So you would invite administration to send representatives to the forums, and then you would help organize or encourage the affected citizens to actually meet directly with the departments. Is that what you were saying?
Yes,
Thank
definitely.
you. Thank you. All right, Robin, it's all yours.
Thank you. I have a follow-up on this line on our thinking about drainage issues and flooding in Kihei. So one of the challenges when you look at the county proposal of the concrete line channels from the highway to the ocean, and you try to find alternatives using more nature-based solutions, one of the challenges is acquiring the land, the space. Basically, we need space for the water and for the mud. And so one of the challenges is acquiring the space. And even when the county set aside $5 million of open space funds to buy 2 of the gulches, the developer that owned those gulches just raised the price to a ridiculous amount. And so they were not purchased. So my question is, would you be willing to have the county use eminent domain where necessary for public safety and these public purposes to acquire the lands that are needed? Because I'm getting the idea that we're never going to win against the real estate development market if we're competing with them for the land that we need.
Yeah, that's funny because while you're talking about the words eminent domain was flashing in my head. So that's what I would do. I'm not afraid to use eminent domain. I'm not afraid to do what needs to be done. And if that's what needs to be done because there's an emergency and because we need to keep people safe, then yes.
Mahalo.
Rita, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I have a question, sort of general, but if you could change one thing in our zoning code, what would that be and why?
Change one thing in the zoning code. I would change, yeah, this would not fly, but if I could have the power to do that, I would change zoning, property zone from highest and best use to what's called current use.
Can you explain that?
In many states, all of properties in Maui and all over are zoned what's called highest and best use. So you got to get the most profit, the most amount of money for the property. Under current use would be like land that's zoned ag here. So it's used for agriculture, for those of people that get ag water. And so you, instead of zoning at highest and best use, you could zone it at current use, and the property value would be less.
And that would lower property taxes?
Yes.
Okay. And how would that impact how we use land today?
Well,
Go ahead.
I'll give an example. I lived in Washington State, and any agriculture and forestry land was valued at current use.
Ah,
And so how it impacted is that they paid lower property taxes, and in exchange, they had to keep their land in agriculture or in forestry.
mm-hmm.
And they had to preserve that. So they weren't allowed to, example, cut trees down.
Right. So, for instance, I live up in Makawao, and I'm in a mixed ag residential community. So I'm surrounded by people and cows and goats and horses and all of the above. I was out wrangling cows yesterday that broke through the fence. How would a lot of the properties up country that are mixed use, ag and residential, how would those be affected?
Well, those lands that are zoned ag would be valued at current use. And
Mm-hmm.
those zones, well, ideally, okay, so if I was king, right? You're saying if I was king and I could do this, it would be all land would be valued at current use.
Okay.
That automatically reduces the value of the land, right? And many people would not like that, but it also makes it so that since land is the most expensive part of the value, land versus the building, would
Right.
make those properties more affordable.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So I'm going to key off affordable. What do you find outside of zoning? What do you find the biggest challenges to building affordable housing here on Maui?
The biggest value, the biggest challenge in building affordable housing is that it takes too long. We're talking about 5 to 8 years. So my proposal, and as part of my 4 pillars, is to stimulate more community land trust, housing community land trusts,
Mm-hmm.
where the affordable housing fund can be used either by a nonprofit or by the county, because the county did own a building in Lahaina before the fire, Lahaina Crossroads, and use those funds to stimulate more community land trusts, community housing land trusts, where the land trust owns the land, gives a 99-year lease to the owner of the building,
Mm-hmm.
and they pay a yearly lease fee.
Right. Have you seen that used successfully in other areas?
Well, we have 2 community land trusts already on Maui, so they're already being used.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to stimulate more purchasing
Okay.
from those land trusts or bring in other land trusts that are on different islands.
And will that accelerate the timeline of 5 to 8 years?
Well, if you're purchasing a house with an ohana that's already built, instead of having to build one, then that's going to be faster, because all you have to do is bring the house up to code and the ohana up to code.
Right. So going back to my question about accelerating building more affordable housing and finding land to put into a community land trust, how can we accelerate the building process? Do you feel like that's a red tape issue? Is it a supply issue? Is it an economic issue? And how can we accelerate the development of these new affordable housing communities?
Well, I would propose that we do expedited permitting for affordable housing.
Okay.
So that's how I would accelerate it. At this moment, I don't think we can control the supply issues,
Right.
but I would propose for affordable housing, expedited permitting.
Okay.
And if that means contracting out to do permitting, like they're doing in Lahaina, they're contracting out to an organization or
Right.
business, then I would say, let's do it.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on the affordable housing question. So land trusts usually hold the land in perpetuity because that's part of their mission is to create a long-term stable supply of housing. whereas our workforce housing law creates affordable housing over a shorter term. And the rationale has been that the way a person can get ahead, a family can get ahead, is by saving to buy a house, and then eventually they can sell that house, make a profit, move into a bigger house, and build generational wealth that way. Do you have any feelings on what proportion of perpetually affordable housing we kind of need in the mix of what we're building? Is there a certain proportion that we do need to just remain affordable in perpetuity? Or do you have any thoughts on, what that balance would be and what you would do about it as a council person?
Yeah, I need to think more about if there's a certain percentage of the population that would need affordable housing, and as a council member, I would still favor the land trust model over like the current workforce housing model, which I think is 10 years. And then after 10
At the
years,
most, yeah.
at the most. Um, yeah. In the land trust, there are different land trust models, but some land trust models, the owner can sell just the building and accumulate a certain amount of profit from that, but not the land. So it depends on how the land trust is formed, as whether the owner can sell in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And I know the land trusts allow the children and grandchildren of the owner to be able to own, so you can pass it down generationally.
But if you were on the council, do you think we would need to revisit our our workforce housing policy to make more provisions for give incentives for housing in perpetuity?
Yes, I would agree to that.
All right. I'm going to switch to kind of a related topic. So last year there was a long and drawn out hearing at the county council over some bills called 171, 172. Basically, they changed the conditions of zoning slightly for a long-term project called the Honua'ula project. And one of the things they changed is the amount of affordable housing it promised to deliver. The original promise was 450 acres, and that was in our county code, but the amendment was to our county code to reduce that to somewhere between 288 and maybe an additional 50, depending on what happened with highway widening. If you would have been on the council, what would you have, where would your vote have landed? And, what kind of questions would you have been asking and information asking for before you made your decision?
So I would have voted for no on changing. I think you're talking about what's called Wailea 670.
Wailea 670 was the old
Yeah.
name of it, yeah.
Right, it was the old name of it.
Yeah.
So I would have voted no to reduce the amount of affordable units. And what questions I'd be asking is, I don't think there'd be any questions I'd ask because we don't have enough affordable housing and we have to draw the line and say, that we need more affordable housing, and if the developer feels like they can't create that, then let's find a solution to how they can.
Well, I think that I didn't actually watch a number of the hearings. I think I watched one, but I think that the premise that was put forth by the developers' representatives was, look, this project has taken so long, it's cost so much money that we really can't build that 450 units. Maybe we could have if we had, gotten going within 4 or 5 years of when we got our approvals, but now it's just not possible. So this is what we can do. So that's what I mean. What kind of questions would you ask to see if there's any other solutions there?
I would probably ask them other questions. And the fact that it took so long has to do with I assume it has to do with permitting process. And so I would ask questions about why they can't still do those 450 units. I mean, they've said because it's taken too long, but that's how long it takes. It takes 5 to 8 to 10 years.
Would you, as a councilman, think you might have to have your staff research additional information to see if there would be some other way that those affordable units could be built or anything along that line?
Yeah, I think I would definitely have the staff research those questions about how else could they develop more affordable units. Thank you for that.
All right. Well, just, that was an important issue, and who knows, council members might see it again. The no telling. All right. I'm going to pass it on to you, Robin.
Okay. Wow, we've covered so much ground. Procedurally in how the council runs, are there things that you would want to change in council procedures?
Yeah, first during the budget process, it's usually the council president that sets how many additional budget items that each council member can choose, and I think that should be a decision of the council themselves, not just the council president. Second, when we proposed rent stabilization, the chair of the Housing and Land Use Committee basically said, we're not going to move this any further without consulting any of the members of the Housing and Land Use Committee or any of the members of the council themselves. So I would change that procedure also.
So you would have the chair not have the ability to just stop legislation without further consultation with committee and council members.
Further consultation and a vote with the committee. Yes.
Thank you. Rita?
Thanks. I have so many questions, but I'm going to ask this one. It's about growth on Maui. And at one time, we had a 10-year plan that was not renewed that limited tourism so that tourism would never exceed a particular percentage of the population here on Maui. However, tourism at times, at peak tourist seasons, it does exceed those limits. Do you have an idea of how we could cap tourism, if we should cap tourism, and whether growing our number one industry is good for the residents of Maui, and especially with an eye towards the Hawaiians and their culture, and how this affects their culture, the growth of Maui? And what is your opinion on fast growth, slow growth, no growth?
Thank you. That's a lot of questions.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of packing them all into one there, but yeah. Let's start with what percentage of island population do you believe we should cap tourism at?
So I believe that the percentage that was originally set, the amount of tourists versus residents, should be reinstituted, that cap.
Right. I think it was 30%, something like that. But it is
Maui Island Plan.
Maui Island Plan, yeah. And how can we implement that plan? We've got cruise ships coming in that are not hotels. We've got hotels. We've got tourists coming in staying in rental, Airbnb rentals, and then we have tourists coming in, staying in private homes. How can we manage that number?
So that's a good question. Managing that number, well, first I would need to do more research because I'm not sure that the county can manage tourism itself.
Right.
I mean, the way that the county attempts to manage tourism is by limiting short-term rentals or other needs, or
Yeah.
limiting the amount of bed and breakfasts.
Right. A previous council instituted a hotel moratorium. However, the mayor at the time overrode that. Do you believe that we need to institute a hotel moratorium to limit tourism?
So you mean a moratorium on the development of more hotels?
Building more rooms, yes.
Uh,
Building more rooms or building more hotels?
yes, I think we need to have a moratorium for right now on building more rooms, more hotels. Yes.
Okay, and then as far as growth, the island, on one hand, we have too many working homeless people, houseless people, who need shelter. And then and we need to provide shelter for them. At the same time, we don't want to grow so rapidly as to impair what we value in the Hawaiian culture. And as far as the Hawaiian people go, their wish to keep growth more controlled. How do you balance this issue? How can the county council, or how can you work with the county council to balance this issue?
So part of what I'm proposing is that we have a more diverse economy. So not so dependent on tourism. And that is one way to manage this issue.
Right.
Is we can create more if we're creating more solar energy on rooftops, we're creating more jobs that way. So that's another industry we can have here. If we start, as an example, recycling more. So we could recycle green waste. We have a place right now where you can bring your green waste. But if we had curbside recycling of green waste, that's another way to create more jobs that are more diverse and not necessarily touristable. So I believe,
How do you,
just believe there should be more a diverse economy
right,
because tourism, because prices are getting more expensive. And so there's going to be less tourism as prices get more expensive. So we need to diversify.
we need to diversify. How do you feel about bringing in something like data centers for quantum computing or AI computing, that sort of thing? How could it would bring jobs, but obviously it would have an impact on electrical resources. How would you want to attract industries such as this? Or what kind of industries, bigger industries, would you like to attract to Maui?
So I wouldn't want to attract a data center to Maui because it's going to use more water, more electricity. So I don't want to do that. I wouldn't want to do that. So I want to attract more industries that are more, let's see, called friendly to the earth. So things like more recycling, more use of solar and wind farms, those kinds of industries.
Of high growth industries, do you have any high growth industries that you would like to bring to Maui in order to diversify the economy?
Well, I just want to say one more thing on data centers. Data centers don't employ a lot of people. So you wouldn't be creating more jobs that way.
Some jobs, yeah, no, for the
Some
square
jobs.
footage, no, I agree
Right.
with you. I agree with you. But I'm looking at the high growth industries where we can make an impact. Recycling, and those sorts of things, we're sort of limited by our population unless we want to create a super recycling center for all of the islands, that sort of a thing. but something where we can employ people, keep our educated children on Maui, and give them opportunities outside of tourism and agriculture.
Well, right now, if you work in tech, you can work from anywhere in the world. So there are ways to attract more tech workers to Maui.
Right.
But to do that, we need to have lower housing prices.
Absolutely. I'm one of those tech workers.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ellen.
Mhm.
I'd like to kind of follow up on this a little bit. Have you had a chance to read the Maui Island Plan economic section at all about the suggestions for what do you call diversifying our economy?
I have not had a chance to read that yet, but now I will go.
Well, it's pretty thorough. It might give you some ideas. Just, it is our blueprint. And many of the things have not happened yet, although they're good ideas. I'd like to switch over to another topic, and that is there's quite a bit of discussion about the county taking over some of the old plantation water systems, the private water systems, and managing them more for public interest. I'll ask you just first about the East Maui system is under discussion at the State Land Board, and the County Council did pass a resolution suggesting that the governor could step in and actually give a set aside of the water rights from these state lands and pass them over to the Community Water Authority, the East Maui Community Water Authority, like transferring a public resource from one public entity to another. The mayor has been supportive of this. Unfortunately, Maui Pono has not been supportive of it. But would you, as a council person, support that as being our future? And if so, what do you think the council could do to help make it happen?
I would support it, and Charter Amendment 12, the people voted for that, so they're also supporting it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would do as a council member is I understand is that there are complications in getting the water rights from the state. So what I would do is find out what those complications are uh, and come up with, well, first, it's just really finding out what are the problems. Because they haven't been presented to the public. I don't know what the problems are.
Well, we could go into this at length, but in a nutshell, it seems like the state land board chair and maybe their staff has sort of set a different um, group of standards for the community water authority to meet than they have for past, uh, for-profit operators of the system. So anyway, to follow up on that, so there is another water system, the Maui Land and Pine water system that diverts from Honokohau Stream and possibly a few other streams in West Maui, and has other infrastructure, has wells and tanks and things. And the mayor is in negotiations to purchase that system. If you were on the council, what would you do to ensure that the kuleana rights of people who live along these streams are taken into the mix when the county would look to approve the agreement? Because kuleana users have rights that actually are superior to just an average customer of the Maui Department of Water Supply, for instance. So, any ideas on what you, as a council member, would want to do to, exercise due diligence and make sure that kuleana water users were had their rights protected, as the county assumes control of these systems?
So I want to know first I want to have my staff do research on what exactly are the Kuleana. Um, what do people who want to have access to the water and generational bad access to the water, or farmers, what do they need? So what are the provisions they would need in that agreement? So that's the first thing I want to do. And I would also have staff that are familiar with, so water rights is not my strength, housing, land use is my strength. So I want to have staff that had uh, water rights uh, with me. So I would use staff to gain information. And then from there, work with those who want um, access to the water to make sure that I'm an organizer, right? So I'm working with them to try to meet with the mayor to try to, yeah, that's what I would do.
Great.
Yeah, because obviously the Wailuku district also has a private water system that many would like to see something better happen with too. So this would be a very real issue, for your district and of course for other districts as well. But are you familiar with Kuleana water rights at all? Is this a concept that you've heard of at all?
I haven't heard of that concept.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good. I know all board members, if you serve on a board, um, you're given training by the Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law on what Kuleana rights are for water and land, et cetera, and it's very helpful. But thank you for your answer. And one follow-up question. Yeah.
Lucienne, we are
Mhm.
getting near the end of our
Oh,
time
we are.
with
Thank
Alan.
you, Paul.
And so, but it has been extremely informative just listening to all these wonderful questions that you had. And Alan, thank you so much for your responses, your thoughtful responses. I think that everyone who's listened to this will certainly get a much better perspective of where you stand on so many issues here throughout our county. So again, thank you for participating in this important exposure to the community so that they can really get to know you well. So
Thank you for the time to interview me.
great. Well, and again, thank you, interviewers. Again, I'm so glad we have such knowledgeable people who are participating in this process. So thank you and mahalo, and we will then move on to our next one.